Under normal business circumstances, growth is kind of what we expect. You open a business, and assuming you know what you're doing, you keep introducing new products or improving your existing ones. Money gets made, bills get paid. Simple, right? Okay, maybe not so simple, especially during a pandemic. But there are a few businesses in Eastern Ontario that have enjoyed significant success during the past 2 years. You want to meet them? All right then, here we grow. Welcome to a very special edition of the Eastern Ontario Business Journal. I'm your host, Phil Gaudreau. If you like this show, make sure to like and subscribe to be notified when new episodes are available. Today, we're celebrating 3 small businesses in Eastern Ontario that have actually seen their business grow in the last few years. You'll get to hear their stories and learn about their successes in our discussion in just a moment. These 3 companies have all been recognized as part of the Eastern Ontario Business Journal's Fastest Growing Companies 2022, sponsored by MNP. For the full list and announcement of our top 10, check out that video elsewhere on our channel. To get us started, Anne Howland, Editor-in-Chief of the Eastern Ontario Business Journal, joins us. Hi, Anne.
Hey, Phil. Good to see you.
Likewise. So what is Fastest Growing Companies and why do we do it?
Sure. Well, it's a really interesting feature, and this is the first time we're doing it in Eastern Ontario. We've done it for several years in our sister publication at Ottawa Business Journal. And I think it's super important because it's so great to hear about these companies that are growing at these exponential rates. I think, growing a company is challenging enough, but growing it at these fast rates is quite something. So I think a few things for me. It's so important to learn from these companies. Growth sounds great, and especially fast growth, but it comes with a lot of challenges. So how have these companies managed those challenges? And also, I think it's great to celebrate these companies because research shows that these high growth firms or high impact firms tend to contribute disproportionately to our economy in terms of hiring people, in terms of contributing to GDP, in terms of going global and exporting. So it's really important not only to learn from them, but also to celebrate their success.
Absolutely. So could you tell us a little bit about the methodology that's used to determine who places in the top 10?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not complicated, really. We send out invitation for companies all over the region to apply, and they fill out a simple form. They tell us about themselves, and they also provide their revenue numbers for their past 3 fiscal periods. So when the application window closes, we review all those numbers, we check them with the company's auditors or accountants, and we do a simple calculation of percentage revenue growth. And from there, we get our top 10.
Very cool. So any surprises for you in this year's winners? Anything you learned about Eastern Ontario that you didn't know before?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great group of companies. And I think a couple of things for me stood out. One, the diversity of these companies from all different types of sectors. I think typically in the Ottawa Business Journal, we tend to get a lot of tech companies in the top 10, but in EOBJ, it's really, I think, representative of such a diversity of companies that we have in the region, from a wonton maker to a couple of tech companies to some metal fabrication shops, professional services, and a tourism company that managed to grow even in this past 3 years that we've had. And I think that's the other thing that sticks out for me too is think of the past 3 years we've had of a global pandemic and massive disruption. So for any company to be successful, not to mention growing at these exponential rates, I think is truly remarkable and something to talk about and celebrate.
Well said. Anne Howland, Editor-in-Chief of the Eastern Ontario Business Journal. Thank you. Ready to meet a few leaders of our fastest growing companies for 2022. Let's welcome them on. First up, Sarah Cadorette is with Plan A, Kingston and Quinte. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. John Witherspoon from HFI Pyrotechnics in lovely Prescott. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Phil. Good to be on.
And we're also joined by Kathrine Christensen of Marble Rock Developers, Gananoque. Hi, Kathrine.
Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me.
So let's learn a little bit about your companies. We'll start with Sarah. Tell us about Plan A.
Yeah. For sure. So I think in the perfect sentence of big words to sound, fancy, Plan A Kingston and Quinte is a staffing, strategy, and technology company. And so we've made that sentence to really try and encompass everything that we do. We're focused on the long-term care sector, and so providing high levels of care to our clients and our partners, which would be our long-term care homes. And so our motto is taking care of people that take care of our most vulnerable people. So the business is really twofold, that on one side, the obvious one, I think, taking care of residents and ensuring that they have quality care every day that we all deserve and filling in those gaps, but also creating really amazing opportunities for our staff that are modern with the world that we currently live in. So just having that work-life balance and the flexibility, positive, rewarding experience for our staff that meets what the demands are today in the world that we live in.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. John, let's go over to you for a second. Tell us about HFI Pyrotechnics.
Well, HFI, I suspect, unlike anyone else on this, is a 150-year-old startup. Next year is our 150th year in business, wow. So it's a rarity, and at best, I think we're older than most of the banks we've been dealing with, but we manufacture in Edwardsburg Cardinal, so we're just north and a little bit east of Prescott. We make predominantly search and rescue devices and signaling devices for usually the Coast Guards and the navies of the world. We are a world supplier of these products. More importantly, we're 60% female, so including Rhiannon Isles, our COO. So we have we've kept a pretty good dispersion of people throughout our organization through it, and it from a product perspective, we're a manufacturer, so it's predominantly bringing materials in, converting them into a finished product that we sell. And as I said, we sell around the world. We're a prime supplier to NATO, and we're doing this all out of the bush in lovely Prescott.
Awesome. And Kathrine, a little bit about Marble Rock Developers, if you please.
Well, thanks, Phil. To start with, I'm in some heady company. I'm really impressed with both Sarah and John's organizations, and I will call Sarah afterwards to talk about some issues. Our company is a construction company. We're a family-run construction company. My husband, my daughter, and I started Marble Rock Developers 3 years ago, so just in time to be a part of the pandemic. We build new, we renovate, we work for customers. We are a construction company that also does development. So our catchment is quite broad. It affords us some cash flow, some long-term investment, and we work predominantly in the Gananoque, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes region of Eastern Ontario, and it's an area that has been undervalued and underserviced for years, and we just happen to have come to the right place at the right time. And we're finding that there's a lot of needs to be met here. So our company is growing as which is why we're all here at an exponential rate, and we are definitely hanging on to our hats on this one.
Awesome. So I want to know what the secret is to all of your successes through the pandemic. And I'm particularly interested, John, maybe we'll start with you, a 150-year-old company, and you're experiencing that kind of growth through the pandemic. What's the secret sauce?
Well, I think a lot of it is the people. We've hired some great, starting at the top of the organization, a great COO who's really driven our growth forward in terms of sort of stabilizing a manufacturing world in a time where you have where we're trying to hire people to fill positions that are possibly not as pretty, but do a great contribution to the company and to the finished product. And we've done a lot of. We went through obviously some bumps in this process. We hired 320 people to fill 65 positions. So you can tell that that's a long and evolving process. And we identified the deficiencies we had in terms of we were probably not starting at the right wage rate. We were not giving people a view of where they could go in the organization. There was no step up process for a young person to come in and say, okay, I can go to here, I can go to there, I can go there, and up through the organization. And I think we've stabilized that quite nicely now, and we've had a pretty stable workforce that's over the last 6 months, 8 months, that has been pretty consistent. There's no question a COVID did not add a lot of value from the perspective. We were a massed organization throughout. We believed that it was important for our first value in our organization is we care about people at HFI Pyrotechnics. So it was key to us to keep people healthy, and that's what kept us going. We've evolved that towards Rhiannon's brought in a great term, came out of, I think, the Welsh soccer team. So I don't know whether it was a drinking event she went to that she found this. But we're now together stronger is a term which is the inverse of what the Department of National Defense uses, which is stronger together. Ours is together stronger, and that's that I think is indicative of this sort of team approach.
Yeah. Interesting. You really underscored there some of the key challenges out of the pandemic, right? You're a manufacturing organization, but you're still got to work in person. That hiring and retention of staff. I'm sure there was supply chain and export and some of those other pieces probably factored in there.
Still going. I'm afraid.
Still going. Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Right.
Yeah. So kudos to you and your leadership team then, for sure. Kathrine, why don't we switch over to you for a moment? You kind of already started talking about it, I think, in your first answer, what some of the secret to the success is, people recognizing the hidden gems and the hidden opportunities in Gananoque and the surrounding area. Did you want to expand on that a bit?
Certainly, I'll talk a little about my life before the construction company. I worked in tourism in this region, predominantly marketing. I was a destination marketing fund. And so I was already very well aware of the attributes of the region. And when the opportunity came, when the synergy happened between my husband, who has a lot of experience in construction, and my daughter leaving a marketing job in Ottawa because of the pandemic, because of being alone in an apartment for 2 years, I guess it wasn't quite 2 years, but I already knew that this area was ripe, and I didn't understand how much need there actually was. We've in the last 3 years, it's actually surprised us. We have had some success with staffing, and that was something that Anne talked about. I mean, during the pandemic, it has been a tough time for some folks to find staffing. We've been very lucky. One of the things throughout the pandemic that has helped us is that we are an essential industry. And I think that people who were really hurt by the pandemic were the ones who weren't. And we took safety and the health of our employees to heart, and we were very careful. But we were able to keep working throughout the entire pandemic. Except for the odd time when someone had to stop and quarantine for a little while, we had enough staff. We had enough tradespeople, subcontractors and such, that were taking the same care and also were essential. So we were able to actually keep going. It was very interesting. And John touched on supply chain. Of course, that was a major issue for us. I mean, all of a sudden you would be able to get plumbing pipe, and I'd be driving to Ottawa to every Home Depot looking for supplies, whatever they happen to be. But somehow, with the help of other contractors and with our partners in the suppliers, we've managed to somehow to keep things on a fairly even keel. Perhaps keeping to timelines has been one of the most difficult things, because we've had to be so very flexible.
Yeah. Well, I touched on a lot of challenges so far that we've explored on previous EOBJ podcasts. There's my little plug for our discussion on housing and our discussion on hiring, which we had in the last couple of months. Let's turn things over to Sarah, the secret to your success through the pandemic, and just knowing that you're in the healthcare kind of field, and I have a feeling I know where this is going, but curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'll start with a common thread that everybody's already mentioned, that recruitment phase of it, and having enough talent to fill in those vacancies. There was already a healthcare shortage prior to the pandemic, and a wave that was coming without it being exacerbated, if I can tongue twister that. So it's been interesting for sure. A lot of pivots and trying to come up with new solutions for that. So something for us being in that healthcare field and recruiting, resident support aides and dietary aides and PSWs and RPNs and RNs and all of those amazing healthcare professionals that we're in such need of, that we offer such a unique spin on really the flexibility again. So using our technology and also using our strategies and working with our partners to identify where those gaps need to be filled in for staffing. And so allowing the staff to have a bit more flexibility determining their schedule as well. So what are their personal goals? What are their professional goals? What's that work-life balance? Recognizing that the workplace now needs to be, a mental health awareness to it as well. And healthcare provider burnout is a huge thing that was happening way before. So being really aware of that and giving opportunities to staff to that perhaps may have left the industry, that are staying in the industry with Plan A because they can create their own schedule, and maybe only doing part-time, or they'll work full-time one week and then only maybe one shift the following week, or whatever it may be. But again, determining what their personal goals are and what they can do healthy to provide quality care to the residents, but also to themselves. So I always say, in order to continue taking care of other people, you need to take care of yourself first, or else you're unable to do that. So really recognizing that side of it. Internally for us, I think a lot of determination, a lot of grit, a lot of sacrifice that I don't think is, mentioned within business as well, that it does take a lot of sacrifice, personally and professionally, to make some decisions, or that you don't get to go out for dinner tonight, or, you don't get to go to the event, or whatever it may be. You're always late to every function, but business comes first sometimes, and especially in the early years when you're growing. And so prioritizing what that looks like, and making those sacrifices in order to get to that next step. Positivity is a huge one for us in the workplace, and just the mindset that everything is kind of given to you for a reason. So looking at it as an opportunity to identify it, to grow, to push yourself to that next level, and pivoting, continuous growth, creating new processes, identifying where there might be some lacks or some issues, or repetitive things occurring. How can we identify this, and how can we make it better? So business is never set in stone. It's a living, breathing entity. It needs to continue to shift as you grow, as the world changes, and that's how you really stay relevant. You hit your next targets, and you can be aware of what's going on in your business, but also around you. What's the market look like? What's your competition look like? What's the area that you're living in? So a lot of things to identify and constantly be aware of. Yeah. And the team that you surround yourself with as well, really does impact how everybody feels coming into the office at the end of the day, right from the top to everybody in between, that it really takes a team to get the job done. It takes a team for everybody to be able to leave at the right time at the end of the day, and go home to our families and have that work-life balance as well. And something we changed, our motto during the pandemic was, instead of all hands on deck, all hearts on deck. So recognizing that every heart has an impact to what we do, whether it's the greeter in our office, or, the people doing the kitchen, laundry, PSWs, up to the doctor, and everybody in between, that, all hearts on deck, that we all contribute to it. We all work together. Without one another, we couldn't get it done.
Yeah. I like that. Kind of calls back to your earlier point. I like to say you can't pour out of an empty bucket, right? And so if you're not wholehearted in the job, if there's something holding you back from that, then those compassionate kind of roles that you guys are working in, very hard to do them. So love the thoughtfulness there. Very, very good. I want to take a look. We've talked a little bit about the secret to your past success and the great results you guys have enjoyed over the last couple of years. What are the next few years? What do you think those look like for your company? We got a high inflation environment, low unemployment, possible talk of recession, interest rates going up. So what do those next few years look like for your company? And do you have concerns about our economic environment, how it looks right now, how it's heading, whether for yourself or for your customers? And let's start with you, Kathrine.
Certainly. So what we're looking forward to, what our business plan is to move into development. There's a huge need for affordable housing in everywhere. This area is what I'm aware of, and not just affordable housing, but housing in general. And in our area, we're looking for places that we can actually develop buildings that house apartments or areas where we can find a way to build multiple homes, both affordable and I'm not even sure what the difference is, but not subsidized, but something that is built in a way that folks who come to the region for the jobs that are here outside of our industry can afford to live in and make their homes in and make the community a better place. I know in the town of Gananoque, I came here 40 years ago, and the sign on the 401 said Gananoque population. I believe it was 4,900. Today, when you drive down the 401, it says Gananoque population 5,200. It's a number that needs to go up, and it needs to go up. Certainly, retirement is big here in the Thousand Islands. It's a bucolic area, but bringing families in who are finding ways to find jobs in the tourism industry or in whatever other sector is nearby. This region that we're in, where we're running our company, is central in the area, and the proximity to Kingston, to Brockville, Prescott, Quinte, and north of here. There's lots of potential for developing the entire region and adding amenities, because more people means that your tax base is larger, all of those good things. So our focus is to find a way to meet those needs in housing and to have our company take that route as well. We're looking at making more long-term investments and perhaps even morphing into more of a holding company, all of which will add to the betterment of this community.
Awesome. Love the focus on community. Certainly I can think of a few tourist towns out west where very, very difficult for the workers doing all those important tourist jobs to actually find affordable places to live. So I love that.
Absolutely.
I mean,
what comes to mind is the Banff Canmore area, of course, where you hear stories where people are living in their cars so that they can work in the industry. Now, we don't have that problem, but we do have a problem here. And it is something here in the municipal elections. We're listening to a lot of talk about affordable housing and transportation options, those sorts of things. But the housing is something that Marble Rock developers can address. And it is both a need and an opportunity for our company.
Absolutely. Sarah, let's turn things over to you for a moment. What do you think the next few years look like for your company? And do you have concerns about the economic indicators we're seeing, whether for you or for your customers?
Well, to touch on a point that Kathrine had just mentioned, in terms of housing as well, is that you look at where long-term care homes are currently being built, where the land is available to put up these massive areas and facilities, and then not having the workers in those areas, right? Not having a close enough living or even a hotel or a motel to stay in, So that's something that we've recognized as well in this area, that we service a 100-kilometer radius around our Kingston-based office location. And so a lot of that does take into some of those communities that are quite the commute for our staff to support. And then we're recognizing that our partners are facing recruitment and retention issues, in the sense that, again, the commute is quite detrimental, that it adds to their day significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So they're facing these issues, we're facing these issues. With our model, we can look at things a bit more strategically, or do things a bit outside of the box. So we're constantly trying new methods and seeing what can work, or listening to staff. What's the feedback? What's something that you're wanting? What is something that would not necessarily incentivize you, but what would help to bridge that gap of you being interested in going there and obviously losing maybe another 2 hours of your day, an hour there and an hour back home. So looking at those things, and through the pandemic, in that first wave, there was so many meetings, and listening to all the broadcasts and the change and the policy change. The Long-Term Care Act just changed in 2001, that came into effect. And so many changes were happening beforehand, but also expedited now with recognizing the need to integrate, infection control and prevention, and having better plans in place for emergency response, recognizing the system was old and it needed to be revamped and addressed to today's living situation. And that the tailwind of the aging population is not even at its highest peak at this point. So trying to prepare for what does the next 10 years look like, and how can we start to address some of these issues today to be prepared for what is to come, being very aware of not only the pandemic putting us in a situation that you got to pivot, you got to look at the future, and you got to address this, because now investing dollars into education of additional PSWs and nurses, although fantastic, a nurse isn't going to be ready for quite a few years until they truly hit the floor and are able to work and provide that care. So trying to address the issues a bit more proactively, recognizing that it is coming, the data is there, it has been there, but people are talking now and people are looking for strategies. So being able to have those partnerships and those conversations, the open dialogue within our sector is amazing. So listening, trying, giving it our best shot, always finding ways of improvement for recruitment and retention. The offering that we have to our staff is something that will continue to evolve.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned retention in there too, because you can train all those people and get them through their classes and pass all their exams and such. But if they get out into the field and they get burned out within a few years, right? That's a challenge. So glad you thought that, incorporated that into your thinking. What about you, John? What do the next few years look like for a 150-year-old company still on the grow?
Well, it looks like a blink, right? I mean, at the end of the day, but I would say it's significantly different, because, and Kathrine, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on supply chain, but I believe our supply chain is going to continue to be a challenging world. I think we are slowly collapsing it in. We have gone from sourcing metal parts from China to Napanee. We're doing a lot of work in sort of within the sort of couple hundred miles, or I guess I should be saying 300 or 400 kilometers of our facility, because for that reason is that the inconsistencies. We currently, as an example, have a batch of chemicals coming out of India that have been stuck in. To give you an example, stuck in export control for a month. So when these things happen, it ripples through our ability to create product for our customers, and that's, I think, the biggest piece is trying to do that without just buying lots of material and find yourself 5 years from now with all this aged out materials, and that's where I think we're becoming more aggressive at how we manage our supply chain, whether it's bringing it closer to home. The good news is that, it's not a good news. I think it bodes poorly for the world in general. But China is with China becoming a more of an offensive country versus a partner, is that we're finding a lot of our customers, whether it's NATO, Canada, or the US, are very particular about where our materials come from. They're uninterested in having China be a supplier. Well, in some instances, we're stuck behind between a rock and a hard place, because a lot of our chemicals, or because they're typically raw chemicals, whether they're red phosphorus as an example, or some of our dyes, which are clothing dyes. Canada hasn't been producing clothing dyes for 50 years. I mean, so it continues to be a continuing challenge for our supply chain side, and but with every challenge is an opportunity. So we're seeing those as potential opportunities. And the biggest one, and again, I'm sure my compatriots here will admit that it's a problem, is that we're basically doing quotes now for 6 months, a year from now, and our suppliers are giving us 24-hour valid pricing.
Mm-hmm.
So you guess what this stops becoming a manufacturing business, starts becoming a horse race, and that's not the way to go. But.
Anybody want to jump in on that one?
I'd like to jump in. I'd like to talk about the price of a piece of wood, the price of a 2x4. I think everybody who's watching and is on the call here or on the show understands, has seen the price of the 2x4 go from here when I quoted to here when I'm buying to here when I'm billing, and the confusion in that triangle is one of our biggest problems. It's right across the board, and I know that there's been shiploads of quartz countertop. We also run a kitchen and countertop supply storefront here in Gananoque, and there was actually a ship stuck in the harbor that couldn't offload, and we waited and waited. I mean, at some point you have to do something else, but
is it stuck behind the Evergrande there by chance?
Well, sadly, in the end, it's hard to continue to explain to a customer after 3 months when you know that it takes 3 days once it's in the right place. And the buck doesn't start or stop with us as the construction company. It goes all the way back to where they're building it through everybody, including our suppliers, which are doing the best they can on any given day as well. So yes, it's a little bit like going to the roulette table.
Yeah, John and Kathrine, to your pricing points, I'd certainly heard of some housing developers that, price things a certain way, and they sell the house and they sign the agreement, and by the time they go to build it, it costs much more. Maybe they're not even making money on that house anymore, and so you've got customers looking and saying, "Oh, well, materials are coming down, so your prices are going to come down, right?" And they're like, "Well, no, we got to make up for all the losses we had." in the early days of the pandemic. So there's I think it's across a few industries, and I think you've got some sympathy out there, maybe not so much from the customers who unfortunately pay for those early years of the pandemic, but we're on that same kind of boat, right? So maybe, we've talked about a few different challenges, and I think we could spend a lot of time on those, but I want to leave people with a bit of a positive note. And so I wondered if you could part any words of wisdom in, a couple of minutes or so, advice you have for entrepreneurs, startups, others who are wanting to be on that fastest growing companies list next year. And maybe Sarah, we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think it's staying true to yourself. You're the one that has the vision and the passion and the reason why, that why of what you're doing and the reason that you're doing that. So being able to see that vision and bring it to life is something that, is rare. I mean, there's a lot of entrepreneurs nowadays, but it is still a rare quality being able to see that vision from the seed, the thought, to bringing it to reality and maintaining it and keeping it real and moving is something that takes a lot of determination to do. So staying true to that, people will be naysayers in the beginning, they might not see the vision or understand or maybe support you, unfortunately, but continuing on, because you are going to get there, and you're going to enjoy the ride and the journey. Even looking back on it, no matter how bumpy it is or the ups and downs, when you look back, it's incredible how far you can come, and that you can't you think you possibly can't do any more, and then you do more. So there is no limit to what can be done, and that there's never enough time in the day. There really is. There's never enough time in the day, and so letting yourself be able to go home and get some rest and create that boundary for yourself. It is difficult for entrepreneurs because we're connected to our business and our phone and our email and everything at all times in this modern world. So allowing yourself a little bit of that grace that you give to your team, giving that to yourself as well, to have that space to breathe, the wind down, the separation, and then come back full force. And as I mentioned before, taking care of yourself in order to take care of others. So you need to be able to do that for yourself, your team, your business, and that's really how you continue forward.
Absolutely. John, anything you want to add? Advice for other entrepreneurs, startups, and such?
Well, I mean, one of the best things. I mean, I'm from Eastern Ontario originally. I'm from Long Sault, Ontario. I spent my formative years there, and Eastern Ontario is a great place to run a facility. I mean, if you look at, and it's I think we're seeing a bit of it today, whether it's the P&G exit out of Brockville or Eastern Ontario is becoming an industrial base of local Canadian-owned companies. The Shells and all these companies that came in and took advantage of all the nice government money they were provided, and we've just sort of plugged along, and now we've been assisted also. I think without question, the Eastern Ontario Development Fund is a very important piece that everyone should be aware of, because it is helpful. It can give you a leg up on some things when cash may be tight. But and the good news is that you're competing for more and more jobs from people who are more and more better educated. And so the advantage of this is that all these companies coming in are bringing people with them that you eventually hopefully will be attracted to what you do, and you can then take advantage of that, and obviously attract them away and continue to build your business. And that's a good thing too. I think it's whether it's Brockville Little Theater, whether it's there's so many great things that I think we can, whether it's the Prescott Shakespeare Festival or what, all these things are things that come from having people in the area. And anyone who has ever driven a boat through the Thousand Islands, it appears to be a secret still, although there seems to be lots of boats there, because I'm surprised people just aren't flocking to it, because it is such a beautiful area.
I bet Kathrine was listening to you mentioning all those playhouses and waiting for you to mention the one in Gananoque.
No, I didn't. I want to leave it for her. That's good.
Of course. So Kathrine, your advice for entrepreneurs, startups, and anybody else looking to get started in the next year?
Well, work harder. We're a family-run company, and Sarah, listening to you talk about taking time to recharge, maybe we don't do that so much because we live, eat, breathe, work our company. We've done phenomenally over the last 3 years, and the reason what it comes down to is that we just don't stop. We're tenacious. So I think that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, that's kind of the base. We just work harder. I've got a little phrase that I've been using, and it's work harder, nobody cares. And I know that sounds very negative, but it's not. It's that you have to look after yourself, and you have to look after your company. And if that means digging a little deeper, going a little harder, that's what you have to do to be successful. Now, being successful in this region means that when you do get some time, when you do have that recharge time, you definitely have the best that the world has to offer. I mean, the Thousand Islands, the Rideau Canal, UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Frontenac Arch Biosphere, all of the things that go with it, and all of the assets that have been developed. Of course, the Thousand Islands Playhouse, which is the reason I moved to this area 40 years ago to actually, I was one of the original people that brought that theater to life. But there's lots of people who are doing that kind of work right now, who are starting, and you think, okay, here they go. And in 20, 30, 40 years, they're going to be those iconic assets, those things that we all think are, this is why we're a great community. And it all, I don't know. The rest of the world certainly is getting a lot of information about the Thousand Islands, and we see that in the region with it growing. One of the interesting things about tourism that actually affects us as a development company is that when we see the new folks who are starting businesses in town that are taking over the downtown area with shop fronts, with whatever industries, they're often people who came for a visit. They're often people who came and went for a boat ride out in, the Thousand Islands, who went to the theater in Prescott, or the Thousand Islands Playhouse here, or the Grand Theater in Kingston, went to the county and saw something at the Festival Players. They're those people people who decide to come to a region have to have been romanced in some way, and visiting this area certainly is the beginning of that romance. And then the fact that there is so much opportunity here, sort of seals the deal. That's, I guess, my positive is that actually it is a big circle of life, and we all feed each other. There's nothing but opportunity in this region.
Yeah, you got me thinking, Kathrine. We'll have to revisit the topic of tourism in Eastern Ontario in a future podcast. We could keep this conversation, I think, going for hours, but I think it's a good point to wrap up here. So thank you, John. Thank you, Kathrine. Thank you, Sarah, for your time today. And congratulations once again. So our thanks to Sarah from Plan A Kingston, John from HFI Pyrotechnics, and Kathrine from Marble Rock Developers. Our congratulations to them and to everybody who kept their business growing through the pandemic. If you want to see the full list, head on over to the Eastern Ontario Business Journal pages. Look for that video elsewhere here on our YouTube channel. And our thanks once again to MNP for sponsoring the contest. The EOBJ Podcast is made possible by these sponsors: the City of Cornwall, the County of Leeds-Grenville, the County of Renfrew. Join us again in November, where we'll be discussing manufacturing in this year's edition of Stuff Made and Built in Eastern Ontario. As always, for important business news, check back to obj.ca and check out the next edition and future editions of our podcast. Until next time, I'm Phil Gaudreau. Thanks for joining us.